Welcome to another episode of The Setup. And I'm back in my office today, and I want to talk about why I like mechanical broadheads. There are some really good mechanical broadheads on the market that do a great job. And the heads that I've preferred over the years were the smaller ones. Smaller cutting diameter, up to a maximum of 1.5 inches. The biggest problem with mechanicals comes with the penetration issue if you have a really large cutting diameter, because it takes so much energy then to drive that arrow into the animal. And it's fine if you have a soft tissue hit, but if you hit muscle or you get into light bone, even a heavy rib, going into a deer, it can really slow down a large cutting diameter mechanical broadhead. It really just comes down to accuracy, plain and simple. So if you're looking at what represents an ethical shot, first and foremost, you have to hit what you're aiming at. After that, then everything else falls into place with priorities 2, 3, 4, 5. But priority number 1, you've got to hit what you're aiming at. And under the widest range of conditions, whether it's a rough release, a windy day, buck fever, you name it, I'm more accurate with these small cutting diameter mechanical broadheads than I've ever been with fixed blade heads. And you can say I should get better. The reality is I am where I am. And a lot of bow hunters are in the same boat. They're not perfect. They don't make a perfect release. There are conditions, in the hunt where we just get unnerved and we punch the trigger. Stuff happens. Well, like I said, I feel like under those wide range of conditions, I'm more accurate with the mechanical broadhead. And I've killed hundreds of deer with these things, so it's not like I've killed a couple of deer. I've been shooting mechanicals exclusively since I think it was 95 when I started. And I remember the day I was in the yard. There was a pretty good crosswind, probably about a 15-mile-an-hour crosswind, and I was shooting 30 yards. And I had that was back in the day, with the aluminum arrows. I think it was a 24-13 or a 25-14, big, large diameter aluminum arrow, 5-inch vanes, and I had a 3-blade fixed blade broadhead on the end. And when I shot, I expected the wind would drift the arrow, downwind, in the direction, that the wind was blowing it. But what happened was the wind hit the vanes and it would turn the arrow, and the arrow was impacting upwind. So it was actually hitting 3 inches into the wind on the spot. And whether I could recreate that another day, I don't know. But right then I said, there's no way. I could not have anticipated this. So I went and grabbed a mechanical broadhead, screwed it on the arrow and shot it, and it hit, a couple of inches downwind side of the spot. And I thought, well, I could anticipate that. I'm not going to shoot these fixed blade broadheads this year. And ever since then, I felt like my accuracy has just been so much better with the broadheads. I used to have to do all the fine tuning, micro tuning, and get everything just dialed in. And then still sometimes I'd have to move my sight pins to match, to get them on spot for the fixed blade broadheads. And so they weren't hitting where my field points were hitting. Sometimes, if I got everything perfect, but like I said, I wasn't always the world's greatest at this stuff. It's tough. It's tough to get a bow that's that pinpoint perfect, and most people aren't going to do it. So anyway, I felt like accuracy was the number one thing. So then you got to look at it and say, what are the compromises? What am I giving up to gain this accuracy? And the number one answer that most people had was either durability or penetration. So I put together a scientific test, and right out of college, I worked in aerospace, and one of my jobs there was a test engineer. So I had, a lot of experience with setting up tests that produced the type of conclusion, or produced a conclusion that wasn't biased. So the test that I set up, used a shooting machine so that there was no human element. There was the distance of the shot was kept consistent. The same arrow. The media that we shot into was kind of a gelatinous material, but in front of that there was a hide, like a cow hide, that would simulate, going into the hide of a deer, just to get the blades to open. So anyway, we set this test up. My dad actually did it for me. It took him about a month. But we shot just about every fixed blade head on the market against just about every mechanical broadhead on the market at that time. And this would have been late 90s, I'm thinking. And it was amazing to me. We didn't test the cut-on impact broadheads, back then it would have been the Winke and the, Bear Razorhead. Now it would be stuff like the Magnus and some of the more, like Evo and Stinger, various types of just single, I guess they call them, cut-on impact broadhead. But anyway, we didn't test those because we knew that those were going to out-penetrate. They were going to penetrate the best. There was no question about it. We were testing 3-blade mechanicals against 3-blade fixed. And it was interesting to see that some of the fixed blade heads actually fell apart on impact, which was shocking to me. Some of the mechanicals, tore blades off on impact. There was some really bad broadheads on the market at that time. But the very best penetrating broadhead from the whole test was one of these small 1¼ inch cutting diameter mechanical broadheads. We didn't have any issues with durability with it compared to some of the other broadheads we were shooting. Obviously, we weren't shooting it into concrete or into a metal fry pan, but that's not what deer are made out of anyway. They're made out of the same thing that we were shooting into. Throw a bone in here or there, and that's going to be your biggest variable. So they were, in my mind, as long as you're making soft tissue hits, they were durable enough. Yes, if you shoot them into a bone, you're going to shear off a blade from a mechanical broadhead, but you're looking at a situation where, penetration at that point is probably more critical than anything else. And if you shear off a blade, that might actually be a good thing, in that situation, because then the broadhead, the other 2 blades continue to penetrate. But I walked away from that feeling like there was no compromise on penetration with these little small cutting diameter mechanicals compared to the 3-blade fixed blade heads that were on the market at that time. So then I didn't see a downside to it. If the durability is adequate, I won't say that they're as durable, but are they adequate for the job? I felt like they were more accurate and penetrated at least as well. So I never had a reason after that to think, why would I shoot anything else? And since then, like I said, I've shot hundreds of deer with mechanical broadheads. So that's my reasoning. Yeah, I mean, if you're shooting hogs or you're something else, Cape buffalo, you're not taking a small mechanical broadhead into that gunfight, but they work really well for whitetails. I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you right back here again in the future for another episode of The Setup.